How's it going, YouTube? It's Panda time. In this one we got Cherubimon going up against Lilith Loop. I feel like every time we see Cherubimon, it's always doing so well. It's definitely a super scary deck, and honestly Digimon with the analog just puts in so much work. We have Lilith starting off, going with Agassi, and then picks up Scatter Mode, which is pretty good. You know, for the purple decks, really any purple deck these days, it's like whether you open Scatter Mode or not, I think has a really big influence in the outcome of the game, right? So having an early Scatter Mode goes a long way. It's gonna put in a lot of pressure. See, Boko picked up a Koichi, and then Koichi is gonna discard a Loe. Now the question is, will the Scatter Mode die to security? Of course it doesn't. Hits a Mat, which is honestly awful, just terrible for the Lilith player. And then the Mat is able to pick up the Loe that was discarded. Gonna be hard dropping the dog. I think this play is pretty solid. If you've played Lilith yourself, you know that sometimes you just gotta hard drop the dog, right? It only costs 6, which is actually pretty cheap. And then, you know, you have your level 5, you can mode change, Digivolve if you need, just get some damage, some discard. So honestly, I think it's a fine play. It's definitely a lot better than just Digivolving over your Eyesmon, for example. Okay, we see another Boko. This means that we're likely gonna see Koichi going to the Kaiser Leo, gets, you know, good amount of memory back. Does he have a Digimon is the question. I feel like you still want to answer the Scatter Mode. It's one of the things where I talk about all the time, where it's like Scatter Mode survives, and like, yes, that could be bad for the player, but like you still have to answer it, right? If you don't, it's just gonna get more free damage. We see the nice Bushi. I still love Bushi Agumon. I don't know if Bushi gets a lot of play in the future sets, but he's such a good card, right? I'm sure we can find ways to make it work. Okay, he is gonna swing face with the Rihi, so I wonder if he's gonna ignore the Scatter Mode then. Looks like he is. So with this play, it's like, okay, Scatter Mode gets to swing again. I mean, it could survive in security again, but like that's just another free swing from another Scatter Mode that survives, right? Now, he did survive, hit into a Kari, which is again awful. So actually kind of working out okay for the Cherubi player here. Gonna go into the Nidhogg and can use the effect to pop a Boko. So interesting. Didn't want to try swinging as the Kari would pass turn. Didn't have the mode change or anything, so just gonna go into a Nidhogg. Nidhogg's such a good card. Primarily for the discard, obviously, but sometimes you can Digivolve into it. It does have a reasonably okay effect. For only 3 cost Digivolution, good enough sometimes. So I wonder if you could just ignore the Scatter Mode the entire game. I mean, he does have Boko to work with and a bunch of Tamers. The Rihi is surviving though, so maybe that slows him down. Goes into the Loe. Boko swings and then another hybrid for game. Sword Defeat a little bit too late. Sword Defeat interesting. I don't know. I'm curious on the reasoning behind playing that. I don't think the Lilith deck is something that really needs Sword Defeat. You know, as opposed to like the regular sword. So yeah, that game he actually was able to ignore the Scatter Mode and it never died. And I think most times that wouldn't really work out because purple players can, you know, proc it themselves, or is going to eventually die in security while getting a bunch of free damage. That's set up because he had enough pressure with the Bokomons and the hybrids, obviously, and anything that the Scatter Mode swung into in security was insane, right? First he got the memory fixer and then the Kari. Like in that game, it definitely worked out. So no Cherubi needed. Digimon never even died. Sometimes the hybrid deck's just at its base, you know, you play play Boko and go into them hybrids, and that might be good enough. Okay, so we're going into game 2 here. I do want to say both of these players have really cool sleeves. I definitely like both of them. Gonna see who's gonna be starting us off. Okay, Cherubi. Blindin hits another Blindin. Okay, you know, he's done this play against me before. It's like you Blindin and then hopefully you pick something up that security that you trashed. He didn't get a hit this time, but I guess it's okay, right? Like, the Blinding there is just literally for memory gain. There's a chance that you pick up a card. Okay, maybe not the greatest hand, but I guess as long as you have reheat, it's okay. Like Digimon over your mat feels bad, but if you have reheat, it's fine. Hits into a Dead or Alive, which usually would be absurd in security, but this early on doesn't actually do anything. So really, like, security has been really good for the Cherubi player right now, I would say. We're going to the dog, but it's not the right one, it's the one that's already mode changed. Honestly, yeah, reheat is just free to pressure, right? This is like the scatter mode scenario where you just swing. If it dies, you get a benefit. If it doesn't, you get a free body, right? Finally is deleted. You can use the reheat effect to play the mat. Plays the blue mat. Why does that mat look blue if it's a purple card? You tell me, chat. I don't like it. I like the blue one way better. Takes the reheat one right back. That's how you get the reheat loop, basically. Last game he won by just being super aggro, so I think the Pokemon makes sense. Also, you put him to 1, which is pretty good. We haven't really seen the Lilith player be able to set up at all. Last game, this Scaramouche just didn't die. He was forced to disable into a Nidhogg. Gonna swing, discarding the Jackraid to pop the Boko. Survives, which is pretty good, getting the Boko off the board. Definitely gonna go a long way in keeping him alive. I mean, he has the Gazimon anyway, I suppose, right? And just hard up a Gabu. So now it's the Lilith player that's kind of going aggressive. Honestly, again, not really going for any fancy combos, just back to basics, swing, dude survives, play a couple of rookies, right? It's funny how like Digimon can be this very complex game with like these super cool combos. And sometimes you could just play very basic strategies that like still work, right? I think a lot of times players overthink the game state when sometimes it's a lot more simple than you think it is, right? It's like you summoned your 9k, it survived. Okay, just play another body and then you tread in lethal next turn, right? Like sometimes you don't have to do anything too fancy. He swings, once again survives, Mimi. But at this point, now granted Cherubi does have security that could, you know, save him. There's Deathclaw, the board clear Lasar, but I wonder what is the correct sequencing. I might swing with all the rookies first, because if they die, then you might want to swing over the reheat, right? But this time around, there's nothing in security to kind of save the Cherubi player. So Lilith kind of just took that. Again, nothing too fancy. Just one 9k dog swinging and surviving. Didn't even have the mode change or anything, right? I did find it funny how the Cerberus modes came out in BT4, and back then they saw no play whatsoever. And now people are like, wait, these cards are pretty good. Granted, there's a lot of cards that, you know, synergize with them, stuff like Dead or Alive that makes them a lot better. But it's cool, you know, there's some old cards that don't see a lot of play that in the future always can. And that's even relevant to like the sets that we get today. Like there might be cards in BT7 or BT6 or 8 that just don't see play right away, but might later on become viable for whatever reason, right? And you know, that's one of the things that I love about card games. Especially like as we get a bigger card pool, there's just more and more variety and more things you have to work with, so you can build different things. Ooh, hard drop a Loey. That's a sad panda play. Never want to do that right now. We can assume his hand is atrocious for him to do that, right? This time around, this Katamaro does die, so this is an insane start for Lilith. Like, you finally have your scatter mode and it died. Your opponent is bricking, hard dropping a level 4. Discards a Nidhogg to get some memory to work with. Discard a Jackraid, another Nidhogg, wow. Not only did his opponent brick, but he had 2 Nidhoggs to work with. I feel like this really should be Lilith's game, right? With 5 memory, maybe hard dropping a dog? Yeah, I love that play. You memory choke to 1. The Loey can't go into a reheat for 1 memory, and you know it's gonna cost a full 3. The Bushi's not really doing anything. And then you have the dog to work with, maybe he's got the mode change, maybe not. And then just go into a mat. Okay, that's actually not too bad. At least Cherubi's set up to not get memory choked anymore. Analog reveals a Neo Devi, interesting. You know, there's no side decks, so I guess he just main decks that. I mean, there are a bunch of non-stop Tamer decks, so it kind of makes sense, right? Yeah, gotta ask to read the Neo Devi, so on your opponent's turn, when they play a Tamer, you gain 3 memory. Pretty good stuff. Although sometimes, like, it doesn't do anything. I wonder how much it does for him in this deck. Okay, the dog does die in security. But hey, Eyesmon discard is pretty good. Sometimes I feel like these purple decks are only as good as their discards. Like, if you're discarding Nidhogg's and Eyesmons, you're doing really unfair stuff, and sometimes you can't and it doesn't feel that good. But it's able to go into a Neo Devi, which should definitely slow down the Cherubi, right? At least stop any extra Tamers from being summoned. Like I said, this Loe is just not going to do too much. So I wonder how Cherubi is going to try and, you know, navigate through this matchup, because he definitely had a rough start. And then Neo Devi just makes things super awkward. Like, can't drop Analog Yud, Mimi, Kari, Koichi. It just becomes super awkward. You can play Boko but then not play the Tamers, which also feels bad. Okay, Loe's gonna swing, and hey, it survives. Okay, yeah, he's gonna just force to use the board clear. So funny enough, like, the Swarlisar is insane as a board clear, but even if you have to hit a single target Digimon, honestly, for 6, that's actually not that bad. And I feel like that's the correct play for sure. It lets him actually deal with the Neo Devi, which is a big problem. So I do like that play. Even if it was, you know, quote unquote expensive, it's actually fine. And now Lilith has to sort of start rebuilding. Doesn't have a ton to work with, so he's gonna start building in the back. Maybe try and set up some sort of like promote shenanigans. Gonna just set his own mat. That way he's not gonna get memory choked, and he can take a Jack Raid. I know that most people don't play mat in these Lilith decks, but I mean, as a one-off, I think it's fine. I actually kind of like it. Also, I know I'm calling this Lilith. I don't think we've seen a single Lilithmon. There's a world where he's just not playing Lilith and it's just Eyesmon, or maybe he's got like one Mastermon or something. It's actually kind of hard to say, but we have seen Sword and Jack Raids and everything else that the Lilith deck would have. Plus, I played this guy before in a different tournament and his deck did have Lilith, so I'm just assuming here that this is still his Lilith build. But honestly, you could just play good purple stuff and be okay most of the time. I'm gonna go into a Rihi, swings, and survives. Rihi is just too good, 7k. The Loe does die this time, but now after this aggression, the Lilith has no security. We know they have no blockers or anything like that. So this actually puts the Lilith in a really tough situation. Now he is pretty set up. He's got 2 Tamers, a ton of cards in trash, and at least a level 4 to work with, and we know he has at least 1 Jack Raid in hand. But essentially, because of what happened, he sort of has to win this turn. If you clear the Rihi, then the Rihi's gonna play the Tamer, and then you die to a hybrid next turn. And if you don't clear the Rihi, then you just die to Rihi, right? So with no blockers at all, it's actually super awkward. No way to get any life gain either. So basically he has to win this turn, but he's not really done enough damage, and I don't think he's got enough of the combo set up. He goes into a dog, but it's not even the right one. If he could like maybe mode change, Jack Raid, play Lilith, could do some crazy shenanigans. But with this play, I think he's close, but he's not able to get the full combo off. And just like that, Cherubi's gonna take it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.